Well,
Better gear. I get it.
We'll talk.
So work is really busy for you right now.
It's really insane from now through,
The northern
I'm
part.
stretching to wrap it up right before.
It does seem to be theology.
I mean, we've got.
You're doing it, you have it.
It's just saying.
See nothing.
Luckily, I took most of it.
You're so lucky. Jealous.
Well, it's just the way that my work.
Are you full or is it?
I'm muzzleloader rifle.
I'm gonna move that.
Muzzleloader
Actually decided that I'm
Yeah, move 'em.
not doing it.
and I'll rifle on like go ours.
I'm like, how am I weekend?
Matter of fact, you, Chris? Deer, I'll probably.
Yeah.
That's-
Good for you.
Go back and forth between
So I've been out a few times.
Yeah,
But
well, and I go to New York. I have the sub 18.
I used to, now it's all.
Yeah.
right now, and
Pretty for go permits in the southern tier.
right
Oh.
here,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I got two.
Yeah.
You get two.
I haven't seen him here, but I think that, you know, I think.
Where I hunt out there, it's, they need.
Because that whole lot of
That's what our area is.
We used to, we were about what county?
It's
Steuben?
early.
Oh, yeah, it's one of the highest deer kills in the state, yeah.
Yeah, they kill, that county kills as many as Vermont
I
does.
know. Yeah. There's several counties like that.
Anyways,
so you're traveling for work, you just.
And what is it, a third of the size or
it's just awful for the.
one fifth of the size?
That's how dense.
Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the October meeting of the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Board. My name is Brad Ferlin. I'll be chairing the meeting tonight. The first thing I would like to do is ask board members, first in the room, to introduce yourselves and identify which county you're representing.
Michael Bancroft, Orange County.
Allison Frazier, Chittenden County.
Jamie Dragon, Lamoille County.
Brad Ferlin, Caledonia County.
Martin Van Buren, Rutland County. Paul Noel, Orleans County. Bob Patterson, Addison County.
Nick Burnham, Windsor County.
And next online,
Brian McCarthy, Grand Isle County.
Michael Colson, Essex County.
Brian Bailey, Washington County.
Jay Sweeney, Franklin County.
okay. David Dean, are you with us? I don't see you online. And Neil Hogan is not with us tonight. So David Dean from Wyndham and Neil Hogan from Bennington at this point are not with us tonight. Okay, well, welcome, everybody. Welcome, board members. Next, I'd like to ask the commissioner to introduce himself and his staff that he has joining us tonight.
Good evening, I'm Chris Barrett, Commissioner of the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And I have Abigail Connolly, why don't you go ahead? I have David Sawsville, Catherine Gessing, and Ally Thomas from Outreach. And I think we have the Colonel Simmons and Major Fowler from the Warden Service.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Next, before moving on to the minutes, I would like to add one item to the agenda that was presented and posted. I'd like to add an item number 5 to have a discussion with council, with Catherine, to discuss the possibility of going into executive session. That will be item number 5 after the commissioner's update. With that, moving on to, anybody else have any suggestions of changes to the agenda as presented? Hearing none. Okay, can I have a motion then to accept the agenda as amended with item number 5?
So moved.
Second and second. Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Ayes.
Aye.
Okay, agenda has been amended. First item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes for September 20th.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the meeting minutes from September 20th.
Okay, I second it. We have a motion and seconded to accept the meeting minutes as presented for September 20th, 2023. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, ayes have it. Okay, next item on the agenda are public comment period. A reminder for anybody here who does want to speak from the public, this is a 2-minute amount of time that everybody has. And Allison will be keeping track of time, and we'll let you know as we're winding down. So I don't know if anybody from the public, first of all, in the room wants to speak. Okay, well, let's start over here on the left and we'll work our way around the room.
Where would you like?
Why don't you stand up front? That way,
There's a camera looking at the podium.
looking at the podium, okay.
My back's to the folks, the directors on the line or not?
Well, I
They
think,
have a picture down below.
yeah,
That's what they see.
Podium works, I think.
Okay, so I think that it works out well. Good evening, directors, chairman. As you know, or might know, I'm Andy Phelan. I'm the one who presented the petition with regard to the sow bears. I have appreciated the communications I've had at times with the department, with the chairman. I met with him. I've spoken with Ms. Camo, and I've attended several of the meetings that you have had, including the presentation last week by Ms. Camo with the broader bear presentation. I received yesterday afternoon a copy of the department's recommendations, and I had an opportunity to review those. And I also sent to each of you directors my responses. They're very short, but they're, I think, quite on point to the issues that are presented to this board. This board has an important duty with regard to the wildlife and the caretaking of the wildlife as trustees in the state of Vermont. What is remarkable about, I think, the petition that I have here is that in looking at and discussing with the department the issues on it, we agree on just about everything. That bears that are below 18 months, first year cubs of the year, are unlikely to survive if they are orphaned. We agree that it's best, and this is all in the paper and it's all in the citations of the summary that I submitted. We agree that it is best for the cubs to stay and learn from their mothers about how best to survive as wild in the wild and being less likely to develop problems as nuisance bears or bears that get acclimated to people. We also agree, the department and I, that it is wrong to kill deliberately a mother bear with cubs. We agree on all of these facts. The only thing, or we also agree on the need for education so that hunters know more about bear biology and survivability. The only thing we don't agree on is that the board should issue or direct that a regulation be issued that bars the deliberate killing of bears with 2 minutes already. So what I'd ask you to do is consider if I can have a few more minutes, if you can consider the submittal that I sent to each of you. I have extra copies or hard copies here if you need it. I don't want to take up more time than necessary, but I am available to discuss any questions that the board might have about these issues.
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Good evening, everybody, again. I hope everybody's doing well. I also want to speak to the department's response to the petition, which I've also just read. Oh,
Sorry.
Rod Coronado from Orange.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, forgot that part, and Vermont Wildlife Patrol. The points I wanted to make is that much as Andy says, I think that there's a majority of issues in the petition that the department and he and many other people in the advocacy community agree on. Education by all means, that's always how we're going to inform people of changes ethically and legally as well. But the lack of a regulation that is in line with that education is in direct contradiction with what we're trying to convey to the public about killing sows with cubs. I think that there are, unfortunately, a lot of people who need a regulation to follow a rule before they give consideration to it. I think we see a lot of ethical hunters here, but there's a lot that aren't ethical who will take advantage of the fact that it's perfectly legal to kill a sow with cubs. We had heard about that being a very low occurrence rate in Vermont. And then boom, like a month after the petition was presented on Memorial Day weekend, a sow with cubs was killed by 4 minors. So it is occurring. It is a problem. It's also I think positive to see that in the summary from the department, that the majority of states in the United States with bear hunting have prohibited the killing of sows with cubs. I also want to say that doing things such as a prohibition on the killing of sows with cubs is going to build a lot of social tolerance for bear hunting in Vermont. There's a lot of people who are looking at the sport right now with a hard lens. And to us, this is low-hanging fruit. This is something that a lot of other states have done, and we should follow in line too. And I think that would say a lot to the non-bear hunting community. Otherwise, the strategy of just not giving us anything, and just circling the wagons and barring the doors against any change, that's not going to protect sports. That's going to turn people against them. Thanks.
Thank you.
Is it possible for me to give my time to Mr. Phelan by chance? Is that?
Yes.
No. Okay, everyone gets 2 minutes. Hello, Commissioner and members of the board. My name is Bob Galvin. I'm a resident of Richmond, and I'm the Vermont State Director for the nonprofits Animal Wellness Action and Center for Humane Economy. I want to express my support for Mr. Phelan's petition. It was well researched, and I just implore the board to thoughtfully consider the many just good topics of discussion that were brought in Mr. Phelan's letter. On the topic of ways to come together with the public about certain issues, last month I spoke about the sale of bear gallbladders in Vermont and a desire to restrict that sale. We are one of only a few states who don't restrict the sale of gallbladders within their state lines. I spoke with the commissioner, and he let me know that this is not really a topic that the board can cover. The board doesn't have the authority to cover. And so I am wondering if the board would be willing to work on some sort of letter or some sort of vote of support of this initiative, keeping in mind that the sale of wildlife is a violation of one of the tenets of the North American model of wildlife conservation. And I look forward to any opportunity with this to discuss this matter more with the board and the department. So thank you.
Hi, thanks everyone. My name is Galen Shutter-Ames. I live in Waterbury Center. And I guess I don't necessarily have a position in terms of fully support or fully don't support the petition. I feel somewhat conflicted about it because I fully agree with its intent. I myself would never shoot a sow with cubs. My phone would be out and I'd be sending videos to all my friends. But I do have a concern about the chilling effect and like the enforceability. I would, if this were to go through, would myself and others like me find ourselves in fear of being in violation, something which I take very seriously. And I know, countless others do as well. Would we find ourselves in a space of fear, and would that have a chilling effect on that right and that opportunity to harvest meat for our friends, family, et cetera? So again, I don't have the fully agree, fully disagree, very conflicted, and just something that I would urge us all to think about. But as an educator, I do think that education that's always my go-to, and having a 5-minute conversation with biologist Como at the last meeting, like, I thought I knew quite a bit, learned a few new things that I found to be very helpful. And so I would kind of encourage maybe that direction to be explored, knowing that I know states like Montana, if you bear hunt in Montana, you have to do the grizzly black bear differentiation. Again, we're not dealing with that situation, but potentially is there something there that, minimal input, relatively easy to that high impact, education. So thank you for the time.
Thank you. We're all set. Okay. Ally, anybody online?
Yeah, we do have, if you are online and you want to speak, could you please raise your hand? Okay, so Sarah, I see your hand is raised. If you'd like to unmute yourself and you can speak.
Hi, my name is Sarah Gorsline. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, my name is Sarah Gorsline. I'm a Grand Isle County resident. I also represent the national science-based nonprofit Project Coyote in Vermont. I'm here today to speak in support of Andy Phelan's Black Bear petition. I just wanted to read, I have read through the Fish and Wildlife response to that petition, and I just wanted to read one phrase from that off the bat, which is, I'm quoting, "We believe the educational route is the best approach. This will maintain the hunters as a resource for the future." Now, I'm not sure if I'm reading that right or if that's a typo, but I just wanted to point out that at Project Coyote, our understanding of Fish and Wildlife departments is they're tasked with managing wildlife for all citizens in the public trust. What needs to be maintained into the future is the wildlife, not hunters and hunting practices. That's not your job to protect those. So right off the bat, I have a big question about what you're actually protecting with this rebuttal to Andy's petition. I also wanted to note that you mentioned several times in the rebuttal enforcement that this would be very hard to enforce. Now, my understanding is in order for someone to take issue or if this did become a rule, if someone witnessed someone killing a mother bear with cubs, there would have to either be a witness or trail cam or video evidence for that. So I'm confused about why that would be hard to enforce. I also wanted to note that rules and regulations that this board puts forward are essentially that. They're recommendations. We have a limited number of game wardens who can't be all over the state at every moment. So we're counting on hunters to abide by these rules, which is why at Project Coyote we believe that there should be a rule in place, like 73% of other states in the U.S. have in place to protect.
Thank you, Sarah. That's 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Brian, you have your hand up next. Make sure to unmute yourself, please.
So what's going to happen here? Thank you for letting me talk. What's going to happen here? So I'm out on my bear stand and a sow or any kind of bear comes walking by and what do? I walk up to the bear. Hey, sow, black bear. You have any cubs? See how ridiculous that sounds? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So you're going to ask the sow if she's got any cubs? What about carrying capacity and the surplus of black bears that are produced every year, the surplus production model and carrying capacity? So I'd like you to reject Mr. Phelan's petition, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who's participating online who wishes to speak? If so, raise your hand, please. Brian, you can put your hand down.
That it? Okay, thank you, everybody, for the public comments. We appreciate everybody staying to the 2 minutes and participating in the meeting. So moving on to the next item is the petition from Andrew Fallon about the prohibition of taking sows with cubs. And this petition was presented to us a few months ago, and the board forwarded the petition to the Department of Fish and Wildlife to review and to come back to us as a board with a recommendation on what they recommend for how to proceed with the petition. So tonight, the department is going to present us their position, and I will turn it over to the commissioner and to do so.
Thank you, Brad. Before I turn it over, I'm going to ask David Sawsville to come up in a minute, but I wanted to make a point here. When this petition first came, Mr. Phelan came and did a lengthy and well thought out presentation. And at that meeting, the department recommended not moving forward with the petition. And after I saw that, I've had a discussion with the chair that I felt that was not good procedure and not fair to the presenter. And so going forward with all future petitions, we would probably recommend taking no action on the night they're presented so that the department can take and do a full and thorough examination and come back to the board with the results of that. And I will also tell you that in the intervening time, I met with Mr. Phelan, came up to the National Life, and we spent a fair amount of time talking about this. And I know that Jackie and Dave and a number of people have looked at it. So I just wanted the board to understand that we're, in order to ensure that we're taking the petitions seriously, giving them the due diligence that they deserve, there won't be an immediate response to future petitions. So I hope that makes sense to everybody.
Yep.
So with that, go ahead.
No.
I would ask David Sawsville to come up and go through the recommendation, which you all have received, and we can answer any questions.
As the commissioner said, with the petition, we went through this and we had numerous people looking at it, law enforcement, our biological staff, and many others even with our outreach and group. And as we interviewed and discussed with other states, to see what they have done, and we looked at the biological implications of the petition. We, acknowledge, as we have in here, that, there is a biological implication for the individual cubs. When we're looking at how we are managing wildlife for the future, we are looking at the population. And for the population, this petition would have no benefit. The individual or population has grown over the decades, and we have been allowed to harvest sows throughout that period. So that's when we came to the recommendation of, we believe the educational route is the best, working within our hunter education programs, working within our tag system programs, and just working within our general presentations to the public, that we would do educational programs on ways to discern possibly sows from sows with cubs. There are certain ways to tell some sows and boars, but it's very hard because black bears do, they're not different, dimorphous. And so that's the route we went, was for the educational route on this one, because we do not see a benefit for the population as a whole. I can take questions on that from the board.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on your discussion with the other states that have banned this from taking place?
So Jackie, our bear project leader, and Sean, our major in the law enforcement, reached out to the other states, and they questioned or asked them questions on whether they thought it was having an impact on their population and whether they were and how they were enforcing it. And I know on one case, Sean, you correct me on this one, it was the Colorado or one of those where they said most of the cases that they were making on it were self-reporting by hunters that had shot a bear. And then when they went and approached the harvested animal, they determined they were cubs after the fact. Biologically, other states, all of us, we don't have a way of tracking those cubs at this point. The ones that are released, because of the technology at the moment is not there. You can ear tag them, but with them growing, the way they analyze whether a cub survives or not with the sow throughout the year is generally with checking the sow during the winter in the den, and then whether they still have the cubs with them or not. And that's how they determine whether they survive the year. Does that answer what you were looking for?
Yes, it does. And I have a follow-up question to that. So in the event that, these other states, when they are enforcing this law or rule, if somebody shoots a sow and then they find out afterwards, because say they shoot a sow that does not have cubs with them at the time. So they're thinking, okay, I've got this sow. She walks in front of me. It's not evident that they have cubs anywhere around. They've watched this bear for, a half an hour, 2 hours, whatever it may be. And then afterward, it's determined that this bear has sows.
Has cubs.
Or, sorry,
Right.
thank you, cubs that she bred that year. So in that event, is that going to be enforceable by law if we pass something like this?
I will let law enforcement speak to that.
Depends on how it's written. So the bottom line is with a lot of those other states is that, and like they said, the ones I spoke to, they make cases on it every year. The vast majority of them are folks that made a mistake, turned themselves in after the fact. But the penalty and enforcement end of it kind of varies from state to state. And it would be no different here. The enforceability end of it would, be determined at some point.
Right. So what are we talking in terms of enforceability? Are we talking about if somebody shoots a sow that has cubs present with her, is that enforceable just as much as it would be if there is a sow that gets taken that does not have cubs with her?
Not sure I understood your question. One more time.
So he was saying that after a sow is taken, they can tell that the sow had cubs that year. So in the event that somebody shoots a sow that does not have
I
cubs
understand.
present at the time that it's being shot,
I can
Do you-
clarify a little bit on that.
okay,
What usually happens is they approach the sow and then they find the cubs. They don't determine that the sow herself, they have to see the cubs. That's not that they can,
okay,
they might be able to tell that she was lactating that year. Whether she still has cubs or not, you'd have to determine that. And I
Right.
think that's,
I would agree with that. I mean,
okay,
and that's the part, I think at one point, I think the petition said knowingly take.
that's my question because
If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but it's one of those where I thought I had heard that at some point.
The petition is to deliberately take.
Okay,
Deliberate.
okay, so
yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, you have to have the evidence, to get it. So to hypothesize, I can't do that. I have no idea.
right.
You know,
Well, I'm
Would it
just
be written in an enforceable fashion, more than likely.
and I'm just asking this question because if we go ahead and we pass this, then at what point does this prevent anybody from bringing forward, this same issue with deer hunting? Because as a deer hunter, I'm in the woods, I'm ethically hunting deer. And if I have a doe in front of me that has fawns, there's no way that I'm going to take that doe. But who's not to say that a doe comes out that doesn't have her fawns with her. And I don't know that this doe has fawns. So I'm just, that's why I'm asking.
In your response, you also stated that there are the states that do have a regulation or rule disallowing the taking of a sow with cubs. But the 6 New England states don't have. None of the states in New England have that regulation or rule in place. And I'm just curious why New England appears to be different or no one's moved in that direction yet. Is the lay of the land or the geography of New England different than other states enough to not move in that direction, or is it just by coincidence we haven't moved in that direction?
I don't have a good answer for you on that one. Sean, we didn't hear back from many of the New England states, so we just took it off.
I spoke to my counterpart in New Hampshire, because he was referenced, or New Hampshire had been referenced. And they're putting together an educational video for all their hunters, which is something that they said they would share with us, that we could make part of both Hunter Ed, put it on our website. We're also talking about including information with your bear tag. So that folks, but that's what they're doing in New Hampshire.
Right. I mean,
I can't say why New Hampshire or Vermont, New England, or the New England states are different.
If you look at the history of bears in general. They used to be considered vermin historically, and they actually had bounties on them. And then they became, valuable. And as people's attitudes changed and valued wildlife instead of just trying to conquer it, I think that's part of it. It's historically, we've never had those laws to outlaw them. And I think also is biologically, our population has been growing, so we've never had a need to protect them at that stage. If you look over the presentation Jackie gave you last month, over the decades, it kept going up and plateaus and then went back up and plateaued again. And there's always ups and downs and kind of 3 to 5 year cycles is what she informed everybody of. So there's that bounce, and that's normal in a population. So we did look at that. I mean, but why the other states have not outlawed it, we don't know. I think.
So the other states, how many of them have bear baiting? That have because that make a big difference. If you're watching bear when they come into the bait, you have all kinds of time. Early season here, you got so much understory. It's going to be hard because you might only have 5 seconds or 10 seconds to make up your mind.
I'm going to reach out to Sean. Do you have a feel for that?
I would definitely make a difference.
There are some that do, but as far as like the actual numbers of, because some of the other states that allow, they have pound hunting, some of them allow bait, but exactly which one and how many and the differentiation, I can't speak to
I
that.
have to go and create a table and look at each state because some allow spring hunting with bait, others allow bait in the fall.
That would make a big difference for those states too, because they could study the bear, watch the bear, as it came in anyway, the more open area.
Did the other states you spoke with talk about the success of the rule in decreasing the number of times the sow was shot with cubs, or do they see an increase in cub survival? Were they able to speak to that?
I don't think they mentioned that in any of the responses that Sean had and that. And I mean, it's similar to what we have. I'm assuming they probably did not monitor that beforehand. So to compare what occurred before and what was occurring after the rules in place, but we'd have to go back to them to see if any had monitored that.
As a follow-up to that, was there enforceability issues also with any of those states? Probably you don't know that either, but
I didn't hear the first part. That's right.
Did you find any enforceability snags that occurred in states that didn't allow sows being shot?
I think it depends on the state because some of them have regulations or rules that are written very clearly and they're easy to enforce. But in all honesty, I talked to some law enforcement from other states that, honestly said that we have the law on the books, but it's not often enforced. And then there's some others that, told me they have a handful of cases, 50 cases a year of it. But for perspective, they also kill between 5,000 and 7,000 bears every year. So it's not an apples to apples thing.
Brian McCarthy, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. David, I have a question. It's the enforceability side of it. Is there some way to determine in the field how old a bear is? For instance, if you were to see a larger bear with 2 smaller bears, is there some way that anybody could tell if they're 18 months old, like the ones that Killam releases because they're able to take care of themselves? And is there any way to determine in the field, if you have multiple large bears and a couple of small bears, which bear those, let's call them cubs, might belong to?
Going to the life history of the bear, what Jackie demonstrated last month is bears in groups generally are a sow with cubs. They do disperse at 18 months, and that's when they come into cycle again to breed in that second year. If you see a group of bears, we always recommend that you don't shoot one because it's generally a sow with cubs. And that first year, there's when they're dependent. The second year, when they leave the female at 18 months, they will not be with the sow. And generally bears, other than sows, will be solitary most of the year other than during the breeding season. So you won't see a male bear or a group of males together. They're very solitary and in the same general area. But But size wise, I think that was your first question. If you see an individual bear, you cannot tell the age by the size of it. They've harvested some females that have been, 10, 12 years old, and they're still only 90 to 120 pounds in that range. So it really varies on what time of the fall that it's harvested, what feed they have available to them. And so you cannot tell by size.
Thank you, David. The reason I ask is I have an apple orchard at my camp, and I have seen at one time as many as 7 bears in my 46 trees. And I know these bears because I see them year after year, and I can identify several of them. And I see bears hanging in the same area, feeding in the same orchard as their mother when these bears are 3 years old. And yet you're telling me that that doesn't happen, but I have photographic evidence of it. So I'm concerned that there's really no way to determine when you're looking at a group of bears if it is indeed a mother with cubs, or what sex they are, or how old they are.
One thing that I will let you know is that within the study that was done in the Deerfield Wind Study, bears do share resources within a zone, but they figure out how to tolerate and work within those zones with each other. So you may see multiple bears in the same area, but if they're together in a unit, that is where I would say you would be seeing a sow with her cubs. So
my question would be, the states that have the law that you can't shoot sows with cubs, do their populations skyrocket?
I have not looked at those numbers, so, but I won't, we could look at that, but I don't, you're saying that did the population change once they installed the law?
Yeah, once they pass that law that you can't shoot sows with cubs,
when
does their
they-
population increase?
Yeah. Jackie on?
Yeah.
Thank you, Jackie. Yep. Yes, if she could be on. Go ahead, Jackie.
Hey, I don't think we have that exact data. But I did request from a bunch of different states in the Northeast, their harvest data in terms of sex breakdown. And there really wasn't an obvious change in the composition of females in the harvest that seemed related to whether or not a state had this regulation. It was really all over the map, but in general, most of us were kind of in the same ballpark whether or not we had the regulation. But again, I did not ask for specifics to whether, what the status of their populations were.
I have a question about enforceability and just trying to understand a little bit more why enforcing this regulation is more difficult than any other regulation that you enforce. For example, the 25-foot off the road, shooting a firearm, or, during deer season shooting, after the legal shooting time. And those are all rules that have been implemented. And I'm just curious how and why is this rule so much more complicated to enforce than those?
I have the colonel speak to that.
Yeah, so I'll hop in. I think the issue is in the scenarios you presented, though there's known factors there, 25 feet, daylight, what have you. The reason that we have the harvest of antlers or antlerless deer is because sometimes lady deer grow antlers and sometimes male deer don't have antlers. Same thing with turkeys. It's a bearded bird. You have bearded females. I can't think of any other regulations we have that rely on another entity's presence. So you're basically saying in this scenario that you have to not only identify your target, but then identify whether or not your target has anything with it. And we have nothing else of that type in our laws or regulations. And it creates as the major said, you could write a regulation that could be fairly succinct and quote unquote understandable, But to be able to actually prosecute this through the court system would be exceedingly challenging. We struggle with what we have now. And the unknown of the second part of this, i.e. the cub piece of it, is what is a significant challenge. And as you know, Marty pointed out, most of bear season takes place with significant foliage still. And so your window for identifying your target is not going to be significant. It's not, typically you're not going to find them hanging out in a field or whatnot. In my experience, other than folks that are specifically targeting bears, i.e. bear hound hunters who identify their targets, most of this is secondary deer hunters. You know, their deer hunters are sitting there standing there like, oh, hey, there's a bear. I have a tag. It's not a purposeful endeavor to go hunt a bear, generally speaking. And that's a broad generalization. But, you know, any regulation you name, time, distance, all that stuff, that all has very specific notes that are there. This unknown is that requirement of identifying a target, identifying whether or not your target has additional company. So that's the challenge piece.
So the status of the target changes.
Exactly.
In front of you, potentially, whether you know it or not, it could.
Yeah.
Brian Bailey?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I just wanted to add a little something to that. In order for the state to enforce this, if it were to become a law, the hardest part of enforcement is having the evidence to back up the claim that somebody broke that law. And in most cases, the only way I can imagine that you're going to get that kind of evidence is as if there is a witness to the shooting of that sow with the cubs, and they're willing to testify that the hunter saw those cubs before he took that sow. That's a situation that, to me, is highly unlikely to happen. I just, typically bear hunter is alone, and I just think it would be hard to gather enough evidence to be able to prosecute somebody for that offense. I may be wrong, but that I believe it would be very difficult to get that type of evidence. That's all.
I just wanted to clarify the other states who do have this as a regulation. Did I hear it stated earlier that some of them do, that it's a regulation, but they actually don't enforce it and it relies instead on self-reporting?
I didn't say that. I said they find it very difficult to enforce with the way their regulation is written.
I was the one that mentioned something in that manner, that in one of the states, they mentioned that a high percentage of their cases were people that self-reported.
Just wondering if there's some way to make it a regulation, but rely instead on self-reporting as an entry point for addressing this.
And if we added to the survey at the end of the season, the hunter survey.
I gotta believe that most of the self-reporting is coming after the fact of the kill, and they discover the cubs afterwards. So they're coming forward, doing the right thing and being honest about it, but they did not know about it at the time of the shooting. So I don't feel they should be charged with anything.
I can imagine those that are taking a sow that have cubs deliberately with them are not following most laws and regulations in general. So I think that's a great idea and option. I think those who would be ethical hunters that might not have seen the cubs before they shot the sow would then go to a warden and say,
this occurred.
I'm embarrassed, this happened, and they would come forward. But I think those who are have a little bit more of a rebel spirit probably wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if this is an interim step we can take toward the goal, would also give us some data points if we allow self-reporting, and by putting a regulation in place, it encourages individuals to report that. It would give us a data point, but I don't know if it's possible to write a regulation and simply not enforce it. Or we could say that, or if we can say that the method of enforcement is self-reporting.
They can do that now, with a deer or anything.
Correct.
So, yeah,
I believe
without being.
It's in the way that we word it,
that
though.
was with the antler point restriction, they've had issues with that.
Just speaking about resources, so I would assume this sort of thing would attach to the bear rule. So how much time and energy and resources would it take to attach? You cannot deliberately kill a sow with cubs to the bear rule.
We'd have to open up the bear rule. I think you've just been through the process of opening up a rule. I think that's a good
It's a
model
lot.
right there. Yeah, it would be a lot. It wouldn't happen this season for sure.
The other thing, just going back to the point about writing a regulation that doesn't have a penalty, the way Title 10 is structured, there is a statute that says for anything that there is no penalty, it's $1,000 fine. So if you pass a regulation with no penalty, I think it is going to become subservient to the statute, which has a $1,000 fine. So I would let Catherine weigh in on that, but that would be something to consider.
That's correct.
So I don't think you want to have a regulation that says there's no penalty, because then it's going to be governed by statute.
We could set the penalty at, we can't set a particular
The
penalty.
penalty is
Okay.
set by a panel of judges
I see.
for anything that's handled by criminal ticket.
Thank you for the clarification.
Mike Colson, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Do we have any current data on the number of occurrences that happen in the state in any given year around orphaned bears? How many are we turning over to Ben Killam? How many are Jackie do you know of?
Are you
So-
still on, Jackie? Okay.
I am, yep. So I do have specific numbers for every year, and I could pull those together to give you exacts, but last year was the most we'd ever sent, which was 28, if I remember correctly. And honestly, from year to year, it ranges anywhere from 0 up to that 28 being the highest. Every bear cub that is picked up and sent to the Killams, we have a record of. So, yeah. But that's as much as we can say to it, is the ones that we pick up.
Okay.
I think we should clarify in there that that is throughout the year. It is not just in the fall. Is that correct,
Yes.
Jackie?
Definitely.
And that includes
Yep.
bears that have been hit on the road.
Correct.
Yeah, and yep, exactly. I think we mentioned that in the document we shared with you that, we have no way, we have specific instances where we're relatively confident that some have come from vehicle collisions, some have come from conflict situations, and some potentially have come from hunter harvest, but we have no way of knowing the proportion that each represents.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Jay Sweeney?
Yeah, I think this is a Jackie question. Are there instances or where a sow may abandon her cubs or get separated from her cubs that would lead to them being sent to rehab or discovered, and somebody interprets it as a vehicle kill? Or is that something that happens with bears, or are they pretty much, unless they die, they're together?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to my mind, there's kind of two parts to that. When we had collared bears on the landscape, based on their movements early after leaving the den at the beginning of the season, we could tell when they were moving and they had dependent young based on like the small movements they would make. And we could tell during the early springs when those cubs died because the sow's movements would drastically change. We were never able to document how those deaths occurred, whether she was abandoning them or predation, starvation, accidents happened. So that's kind of the long way to tell you, like although we never documented that type of thing happening by the fall. So our impression was that if these females get these cubs through the summer, they're going to stay together. So abandonment doesn't seem to be an issue by, the second half, really even early summer. In terms of picking up cubs that aren't truly orphaned, we don't believe that we're doing that because we really aren't picking these cubs up until their movements are so localized that they are being seen in the same exact place day after day after day, and we can easily set a trap or even sometimes catch them by hand. So at that point, if the sow was still alive, there's no way she would have been leaving them on their own for that long at that point. So we're pretty confident we're not inadvertently sending cubs that aren't orphaned to a rehabilitator. Does that get at all of your question for the most part?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions at this point?
Brian has his hand up. But I don't think-
I can't see. Brian Bailey? You have your
I
hand
don't
up?
know why that's on. I must have hit it. Sorry.
Can you quickly speak to how the educational route will maintain that hunters as the resource for the future?
Right. So on that subject, basically a hunter is the same as every other citizen scientist. If we don't have the hunters and the harvested information that is the input into the models that our biometrician Jackie spoke about, that is part of what is there. We are maintaining them as a resource of providing biological information on the population. The population the estimate is driven by looking back at last year's age structure, as Jackie brought on, and that's what I was speaking to there. We're not targeting just to keep hunters out there just because they're hunters. We're using them as a resource to collect data, just as we work with anybody else that as a citizen scientist. The same reason we use the information we gather from trappers and other harvested wildlife.
Thank you.
But correct me if I'm wrong, you're not, the primary interest is not to keep the hunters in the field, it's really to manage the bears, but the hunters are a primary tool in managing the bear population.
Hunters are primary tool in collecting the data to estimate the bear population, yes.
One of the questions I asked last month was, what would happen in Vermont if we didn't have a bear season? And we didn't have hunters in the field taking bears on a regular basis. And if I remember correctly, Jackie's response was, well, nothing would happen next year and the year after, but eventually we would lose control of our bear population. And the bears would start spreading out into areas that they don't currently do so. So in my mind, keeping the hunters in the field is very important. And if we have hunters who aren't comfortable being in the field because they're concerned about shooting bears with cubs all the time and potentially facing $1,000 fine, then that doesn't serve anybody well, especially I think the bear population.
And that is the point that Katie Geeter, our biometrician, was making, is that as you drastically affect the harvest rates or the hunter effort, that could impact the results of the models that they've been using. And I'll let Jackie, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I think you both made valid points on, related to that issue.
Many years ago, I attended a seminar by Charles Wiley. He was a biologist here a long time ago. One thing I remember he said is that the majority of cubs were born on odd years. Is that still how it happens, or has it evened out more?
Jackie mentioned that last time, and I'll touch on it. She said that they're alternating years and it generally followed the mass crop. So they've kind of gone in cycle with, like, after a good year of mast where they went to hibernation in good shape and they've been bred, that next year they had a higher number of cubs produced, and then they're on that 2-year cycle. And she still sees that.
Brad, I'll just tag on to the comments you were making that beyond the data that we get from bear hunting, hunting is currently in statute and in the Vermont State Constitution, and therefore this board has a duty to set rules and regulations for hunting, and that includes the species of bear. So we are reviewing those rules and regulations now, and clearly this is one that is challenging.
Anybody else have any questions? Anybody online with any questions? Any members online? Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, okay, David Dean.
Yeah, I'm a little slow in the uptake here, sorry. All enforcement is discretionary, meaning that enforcement, whether it's our wardens or the state police or a local town officer, uses their judgment in terms of assessing the situation and has been mentioned in this discussion, the intent. And I see no reason not to rely on the sort of historic practices of our warden force relative to whether or not what a hunter does in the field has an intent to violate the rules and regulations of hunting. So I can understand the queasiness maybe that enforcement has about being required to judge the intent of an additional situation in the field, of whether it was the intent of a hunter to take a sow knowing full well that she had cubs. But that is not and has not been historically a reason not to make a responsible statement that those are the standards that we as a society, if you will, this board is an outlet for the society here in the state, that we don't want that to happen. And we will try numerous ways to keep it from happening, including increased education. And I agree. It's a tough issue. It's a tough issue for me. I don't want people shooting sows with cubs. Now, how we get at that, that's always the rub in terms of public policy. But I'm inclined to move ahead and rely on the historic judgment of our warden force. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Brian McCarthy, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to rebut David's recent comment that he's willing to rely on the discretionary enforcement of laws by enforcement personnel, but is unwilling to rely on the discretionary decisions made by a hunter in the field. And I find it biased against hunters, as though hunters need to have a regulation in order to make them behave in a certain way. I mean, are we really here to make legislation or regulations rather that is supposed to control people's morals or their philosophy? Or are we here to make decisions based on biological data and to continue conserving our species in a responsible fashion?
Thank you, Brian. David, I saw your hand up. Yep. You're right behind the podium, so that's why I'm having a hard time seeing your hand.
Okay. There was nothing in my statement that should have been interpreted as pejorative on hunters or anyone else. Enforcement takes place on our highways with good citizens, with good intent, who speed. Enforcement takes place with good citizens, with good intent, who drink before they drive. And in the case of what we're talking about here, this is, I presume that there would not be enforcement done on somebody who inadvertently shot a sow, but someone who targeted an animal, and regardless of whether they were young, that might be worthy some attention. It shows bad judgment, and we're all capable of it. So it's not, I'm not slamming hunters or their judgment. Most people, as has been said at the board tonight by hunters sitting at that table, they wouldn't do it. I fully believe them. But what if someone does and they do it intentionally? They don't like bears, for example. Well, maybe we ought to have a method of protecting the species in that situation.
David, this is Brad. I have a question relative to that comment. I understand what you're saying. But if we do this with bears, then are we setting a precedence that we have to do it with every species that is hunted? And if we do that, then what are we opening up if the end result of the action doesn't have any biological impact on the species that we're protecting and growing and assuring that it's there for generations to come?
Well, I'm, as I said, this is a tough decision that this board has to make. And that's one of the counter arguments in terms of, you know, should the board go out of its way to make a rule in this particular situation for this reason that you've just mentioned, Brad, and for other reasons that have been brought into the discussion tonight. I do think, again, it becomes a matter of, now that the issue has been joined, meaning being brought to the board, I think it is important that the response not be interpreted in the public's eye that the board doesn't care if a sow is killed and has dependent cubs. I think that there has to be a statement that the board does care some way, and that situation is not the way a responsible person in the woods acts if they are hunting bears. Now, the best way to do that, I'm not sure I have even a glimmer of an idea in my head of what's the best way to do that. So I'm going to continue listening to the conversation here, but you're right. And I understand what you're saying. Slippery slope, I believe, is one of the cliches that describes what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Okay, Commissioner, would like to chime in?
I would. I appreciate the conversation. And I would say that the board does care. I would say that the department cares. there's also the reality. David mentioned people driving after drinking. And I talked to some friends at work at the agency where we actually are sitting right now, the Agency of Transportation. The way that they've impacted drunk driving with our youth is not enforcement. It has been through education. The government spends a tremendous amount of money educating kids about the dangers of drunk driving. And I have children from ages 31 to 22, and they wouldn't think of driving drunk. And it's not because they're worried about getting pulled over. It's because they've received a constant barrage of education. And I do think we can have a great impact on the very few hunters who either out of ignorance, and there's going to be a few people who may do this intentionally. And I think Jamie made a good point. A hunter that will do this intentionally is not going to self-report, and they're probably not going to have a witness who's likely to turn them in. So the impact of this regulation, from my perspective, would be almost nil. But a good educational program where we talk to new hunters, and we do a great job. Allie does a tremendous job already teaching the ethics of hunting, and talking to some of the other folks, I think is a way for both the board and the department to say, yes, we care about this issue, because we're not just going to do something that looks good. We're actually going to do something that has impact.
Thank you, Commissioner. Michael? So I'd like to make a motion, but I want some guidance first. Are we looking for a motion to accept or decline the petition tonight?
Well, I think that's up to us as a board. I mean, we can choose to, we can, first of all, decide whether or not we have heard enough, received enough information from the department and the presenter to fully understand where both sides are coming from, and whether or not we feel we have enough to pass judgment on it at this point, either accepting the petitioner's petition or accepting the department's position against the petition.
Because in March, the board voted to table the petition, correct?
Until the department came back to us with their recommendation.
Okay.
Of which they did tonight. So they've met their obligation to us. And so now we have an obligation as a board to the petitioner to let the petitioner know whether or not we will act positively or negatively on that petition. Is how I see it.
Okay, so I,
Berlin, just a point of order, procedural, strictly procedural. Can I just ask one question? As the petition.
We're not gonna have a dialogue about the petition here.
It's totally procedural about how to proceed with this here and what the board choose to do. That's all.
Make a recommendation. Why don't you take a 5-minute recess?
Correct. Well, fair enough. I'm going to call a recess of the meeting for a few minutes, because this is not a conversation. This is a working meeting of the board. Thank you. I'm going to call a 10-minute recess and we'll be back shortly. Yeah. Thank you.
Go out that door. They're all next.
Questions?
You're not gonna get anywhere. That's the closet now.
Yeah.
I can tell you where the kitchen is to go.
it's a maze in here now.
I just wanted to say that you were gonna get and watch that happen, because that's what everybody's. I'm gonna stay there.
So that makes no time. Question. I gotta hit the head. Yes.
all of the issues there. Exactly. That's not what I'm asking. Absolutely, yes. It's got all just everybody wrong.
We have lunch? Yeah, exactly. Probably we have lunch.
We saw something that my dad can't help everything. The guy's like, well, the deck scoped up hundreds of thousands of guys.
Can't think of what it is. Anyway.
Good to see you.
You too.
Yes.
But didn't they already do something? So what's my superintendent? Does anyone be?
Yeah, I know. Just he's an eighth grade right now.
Okay, I think so. Just be back. And there's some very specific reasons that are given. It's super, super specific. I didn't know quite a discussion. It is, yeah, I am too.
The deer thing falls there. That's all that.
Do you want to just say I wrote down?
Sorry. It is.
So I did get text that he was gonna. Yeah. I know, it was really hot here, but he did say. Okay, what do you think? Attorneys, do you do any enough resources?
This whole side of the table.
Yeah, so why would?
76 in here right now.
And does that.
Hunting, fishing, and tracking.
And what's the last one?
Tracking.
Oh,
Track. So oh, here we go again.
What part of the-
Everything that is.
Oh, yeah, I did, I was a collegiate athlete for 4 years. Well, I was weird because I was across country. But I actually in track with the 100 hurdles, the 400. And then 600s and 800s and 4x4.
Yeah.
Well, not.
Okay.
All around.
I understand. I think I know. The facts.
To not, yeah.
I never had it, so that's good.
Yeah. What was it?
That's not that enforcement. What's that? What wouldn't that apply to? It's a really ridiculous. Any law, any, right, yeah.
I saw Riley last month. He told me that.
I saw him today too. I'm trying to sell a house and I got a rental. I'll see him this morning. I said, knock that thing down another 20 grand. I gotta get rid of it. It's not about the money. It's just,
Right.
you know, we're out west hunting or something. It's always, I like the issue of a couple rentals I have and stuff. I go, it's time, you know. So I might have somebody interested right away coming up, so that's good.
Right.
Yeah.
It's come on and walked over.
Still have extra money if he sells it to buy you guys something nice, you know, like steaks or something. I'll tell him.
Yeah, actually, he does bring us.
Does he?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Usually the second weekend.
Yeah.
Bunch of us.
So if you walk out that main door and go to the left, then you'll see.
Catherine, you see the commissioner in this? Any chance?
My son.
I think he went to the restroom. Okay.
Yes, he did. Sure. Okay. Oh. I would change it if I could. I think.
77?
It's 77.
Here, we're gonna give the commissioner just a couple seconds here.
Thermostats, real thermostats in the governor's office.
And David, are you with us? David Dean, are you with us? Mike Colson, Brian Bailey, and Mike McCarthy.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
They're working on it. They're trying to figure it out.
That's weird because it literally just flipped like a
Oh,
switch.
cold earlier. Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting back to order, please. And so we have now received, I think, all the presentation from the department, the petition, and we have all heard a lot of information relative to this petition. So I would just like to give anybody a chance to speak up if they feel that they haven't had a chance to digest all the information that has been presented at this point, either from the petitioner or from the department. And if there's anything anybody else needs prior to a motion being presented on the petition. Anybody? Okay, I don't see anything on mine. Okay. Michael?
I would like to make a motion to deny the petition, but suggest the department increase their education regarding identifying bears, sows, and cubs.
Okay.
I'd like to
Any?
second that motion.
Okay, so the motion has been made to deny the petition with the department increasing their educational efforts around this issue. Is that fair? Yeah. And I have a second, at least one, couple seconds, okay. And now any further comments? Allison?
I have a question for clarification. Are we rejecting the entire petition by simply moving in a direction of education? I thought that was part of adopting the petition and taking action on it.
I will answer that based on my interpretation. I think the core of the petition was to disallow the taking of sows with cubs. We are rejecting that component of it. We are rejecting it with an attachment that the department will increase their education relative to that whole scenario.
Thank you.
I was trying to educate hunters not to take sows with cubs present. our cubs.
I think that was part of the department's recommendation anyway, was to enhance educational and advisories. That's.
Brian Bailey?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Before I vote on this petition, well, first of all, I'd like to commend Mr. Phelan for all the work that he put into this. He did a wonderful job, and I agree with virtually everything he says in his petition. Well, not everything, but unfortunately, I agree also with what the commissioner said. I feel that passing this, I guess I'd call it a feel-good regulation. I don't feel that it would have any measurable effect on the population of bear in the state of Vermont. I just think, I don't think, I know that the vast majority of hunters will not shoot a sow if they know that it has cubs. And the few, I'm not going to say there's not somebody out there that won't do that, but the ones that would do it certainly are not going to self-report themselves. They just don't care. There's bad apples in every bunch. And the only way you could prosecute them is if there were an eyewitness that was willing to testify that they saw them do it with the cubs there. I just realistically don't see that happening very much at all, if ever. Other than that, I don't, we got enough laws on the book, and to add one to it that I would call is, I mean, the intent is absolutely good and I agree with it. I just don't feel that it's going to amount to any increase in the population of bears in the state of Vermont. And for that reason, I would have to vote no on it. That's all.
Okay, any other comments before we vote? Yes, okay. So just as a reminder, the motion was to reject the petition as presented. Yes, so a yes vote will be to reject the petition as presented. Okay.
Thank you for that clarification.
All those in favor of the motion as presented, I'm going to take roll call votes. Again, yes is to deny the petition, and no is to accept the petition. Jamie Dragon,
Yes.
Robert Patterson,
Yes.
Michael Bancroft,
Yes.
Neil Hogan, absent. Paul Noel,
Yes.
Allison Frazier,
Yes.
Artie Van Buren,
Yes.
Michael Colson,
Yes.
Brian Bailey,
Yes.
Jay Sweeney,
Yes.
David Dean,
Yes.
Brian McCarthy,
Yes.
Nicholas Burnham,
Yes.
and Brad Ferlin, yes. So with that, that is 12, 13, 0. The petition is denied. And on behalf of the board, Mr. Fallon, I'd like to thank you for bringing this issue up. It is a tough issue, and again, one that everybody agrees with the sentiment of the petition. But I think what the board is doing is just choosing to take an alternate route at this point to achieve the same goal. And we are going to depend on the department to do that, and ask that the department update us at some point in the future after they have developed the enhanced education that they are proposing, and to just keep us abreast of the progress that's being made.
Mr. Chairman, question.
David.
Just on that issue of providing the education, January 1 is sort of the bewitching day. Is there any chance that this additional education effort would be in place for the license booklet, hunting license booklet issued January 1st?
Nope, already printed.
Okay, so we're looking at a year delay before the additional information gets out.
Well, we'll look at other means of getting information to the hunting community, Dave.
Okay.
I think from a board perspective, from my perspective, I should say personally, I would like to have, like you're saying, Commissioner, getting that information out there in time for the next bear season. And whether it's in the book or not, at this point seems like it's impossible. But to get the educational component out there, I think needs to be the goal. And which I think is the same exact thing you're saying.
It is.
Yeah. I think.
Yeah, just to be clear, the Law Digest have already gone to the printer.
Yeah. Okay,
Jacqueline has the show.
who does?
Jacqueline.
Jackie, get your hand up.
Yeah, just to that point, I'm pretty sure we did a write-up for next year's Law Digest on this topic.
Oh, Ally?
Yes, there is a write-up.
There you go.
Of how to
See,
identify a sow with cubs to best.
We were gonna do this anyway. We're gonna do education anyway. I
Okay.
forgot that. Thank you for that.
Good.
So when the law guides get in, we'll get you those. Calendars are in too.
So in fact, we do have additional
Yep.
information as part of the license booklet this year.
Correct. I'd forgotten that. That's why I have smarter people in the room with me.
Good. Glad you got them.
Me too.
Okay, thank you, everybody. That was a great conversation. Next item on the agenda is the commissioner's update.
So I'll start with the education piece. You'll be happy to know there's a section in the law guide on bears. But those are out, and I'll bring all the other materials which we developed to the board for your edification. Speaking of masks, we talked about, somebody brought it up, I think David did earlier. Just for your own knowledge, a couple of weeks ago, Abigail and I went out and did a mask survey up in Eden on Bearsguard Beach, and it's not good. There's not a lot of masks out there. So that will impact the bear somewhat, but also other critters. We're in the middle of.
You're talking beech nuts primarily?
Yeah, that's what we were surveying beech nuts, and not great. So, at the department right now, we're in the middle of budget. We submitted our first whack at the budget to the administration yesterday for 25. And I can tell you it's a little lean right now. It's early to get into the details, but as we start moving forward and things clarify a little bit more, I'll share with the board. And then, as you know, we're back in front of Elcar tomorrow on the fur bearer rules second day. And we've responded to what we heard in the first day from the Elcar committee. And I think everybody has seen it. It's been posted. We sent it in. And we'll see how that goes tomorrow. I also will tell you that we had interviews this week to replace Mark Scott. I had 4 very qualified internal candidates, and I hope to have a final decision made by the end of this week. And I'll let folks know who that is. But I would suffice it to say that, we're blessed in that, we have a very difficult choice to make. And that's all I've got. I'll answer any questions folks might have.
I just have a quick question around timing. The second meeting is tomorrow on Elkhart.
Yep.
And so the answers that you provided them, based on the questions that they asked, you know, you indicated that you're proposing, you will propose additional changes to the board. The fact that we have not reviewed those responses yet as a board, it's probably unlikely they will approve the rule tomorrow, I would think.
I think that's also unlikely. And so I think they meet every 2 weeks.
Yep.
So I think, and Catherine, tell me if I'm making a mistake here, but we should plan a board meeting as soon as we can after 2 weeks from tomorrow. Correct? Is that what we talked about?
I think, yeah, I believe that their first meeting in November might be packed, so.
Yeah.
I suspect that we're gonna need to meet, sometime in early November.
Don't they only meet once a month?
They meet
When is-
twice a month.
Oh, even when they're not in session?
Yes.
Okay.
They're busy right now.
Yeah. They, it's, you know, on a Thursday, twice a month.
So, so the meeting is tomorrow on the 19th. And they're likely not to vote on the rule tomorrow, which means they'll meet again sometimes in 2 weeks, which will be somewheres around the
Like the
November 2nd
second
or
yeah.
3rd. So what I think I'm hearing you say is that if we are going to meet in time for that meeting, we should plan on meeting sometime before the 3rd.
No.
No, after the 3rd.
Like the
So, okay, I mean, I guess we have to wait and see what the meeting tomorrow brings, additional
That's also
questions and
true.
whatnot.
That's why, it's, let's wait and see, and then we'll have more information. We can, it'll clarify itself.
Okay. Okay. Okay, fair enough. And then, okay, we'll see what tomorrow brings. Okay. Any questions for the commissioner?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Commissioner, I believe that you said that you had posted something relative to what happened today in front of Elkhart?
No, we did not go to Elkhart today. We go tomorrow.
Go tomorrow.
And we had to have a submission in on Monday of this week, which was done.
Okay, what was posted? Because I missed it, whatever it was. And
it's
showing my ignorance here.
Just a response to the information we got from Elkhart.
So you should have received an email from the commissioner.
Questions
David, you
from
should-
Elkhart.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think it came this morning, maybe? Was it this morning, yesterday? Yeah, yesterday. Yeah, it came from Abigail.
Okay, I've been on the road for a while,
Yeah.
so, okay.
Yeah.
So I should look in my Fish and Wildlife Board email for information on Elkhart.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, if no other questions for the commissioner at this point, our next item is having a discussion about the possibility of an executive session that I will turn over to Catherine at this point. And Catherine can walk us through this.
So under, can everyone hear me? Under Title 1, is it 3? Title 3, I believe it's Title 3, Section 313A. It's actually Title 1, sorry. Title 1 of the Vermont statutes, Section 313A
boards can go into executive session for specific statutory reasons. And one of the statutory reasons is to have a confidential attorney-client communication made for the purpose of providing professional services to the board. I think most of you know that we received a letter from Legislative Council about the trapping rules, about the fur bearer species rules. And the purpose of this particular executive session would be to provide the board with accurate legal advice about the statutory authority of the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rulemaking, to advise the board about what are the reasons that the committee can object to a rule, what course of action the board has in response to those objections, if an objection were to happen, and what are the consequences if the board were to proceed with promulgating a rule over the objection of Elkhart. So, and as well as what are the consequences if the rule were subsequently challenged in court. So it's to give the board accurate information about those legal issues. So as part of the process, the board should know that no other matter can be discussed in executive session and no decisions can be made. So in other words, this is just to have that discussion. It's not to vote on anything. It's not to come to any particular decisions. And no, so you're not making any decisions about the rules per se. We're just giving you legal advice about how the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules operates and what their legal constraints are and what the consequences are of certain actions that the board might take. So it's an opportunity to give you some information so that you can make good decisions. And before you go into an executive session, you are required by statute to make a specific finding that general public knowledge would clearly place the board at a substantial disadvantage. In other words, that you would not be able to make good decisions about how to move forward in the rulemaking process without this information, without this legal advice. And so you would have to make that finding, and hopefully what I've said here is helpful to you. And then somebody would have to make a motion to enter into executive session to receive the legal advice regarding the Elkhart process and the review of the rules under Elkhart. And in order to succeed, in order to actually get to the executive session, there has to be a 2/3 vote to approve going into executive session. So just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of background before you start talking about whether this is something that you think is a good idea.
Okay. I guess if I understood you correctly, Catherine, we have to have a finding, if you will, that there's a good reason for us to go into executive session before there's even a motion.
Correct.
So, does everybody understand that? Okay, so just, here's the question. Do you support the fact that we have a finding that will benefit the board, and will that, if we didn't go into executive session, would put us at a disadvantage?
A substantial
disadvantage. So everybody who agrees with that, please signify by saying aye. And raising your hand.
I,
Aye.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, the vote's unanimous. So with that said, we've agreed with the finding. Now I need a motion to go into executive session. And before making that motion, if you could make the motion to include the board and the department staff only.
I will make
move-
that motion.
Brian, I think Mike just jumped ahead of you, Brian.
I move
Okay.
I move to enter into executive session to receive legal advice regarding the LCAR process and to review the fur bearer rule per Title I VSA, Section 313 A1F for the
I'll second
board
that
and
motion.
department staff.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I have a second. Brian Bailey is seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Ayes have it. Okay. We're going to take a 5-minute break. And when we return, it will be just the departments and the board. If I can ask anyone else, part of the public, to give us the opportunity to have a closed meeting at that point, we would appreciate it.
Just a point of, Abigail is going to send out a new, link for the folks that are online
Okay,
so that, you know, it's just directed to them.
so if you folks online want to sign off at this point, you will be receiving, if for you folks that are online attending the meeting, board members, if you please sign off, Abigail will send you a new meeting request with a link just for the 4 of you that you can log into the executive session.
Okay, thank you.
That,
Thank you.
that be
you.
sent by.
Thank
email?
you.
That
It
link
will be.
Sent by. Okay, thank you.
Yes, yeah.
This link down.
Yeah.
So I get to stop.
Oh, I haven't heard anything yet.
Starting there and then. Thank you for the reminder.
That's what I was just saying.
Still recording.